The following content contains sensitive material that may be disturbing or triggering to some listeners. Topics include discussions of psychological abuse, traumatic experiences, and other potentially distressing themes. Viewer discretion is advised. If you or someone you know is struggling, please seek support from a trusted friend, family member, or professional. Welcome to another episode of Sins of Scientology, where we delve into the shadowy corners of one of the world's most controversial organizations. I'm your host, Sandy McKenna, joined by my co-host, Abraham Ulrich. Today, we continue to dive deep into the tragic story of Lisa McPherson. In Part 1, we explored Lisa's background and her journey within Scientology. In Part 2, we focus on the critical events of November 18, 1995, the day of her car accident and the ensuing chaos that would mark the beginning of her harrowing final days. We'll hear the detailed recollections from first responders, medical staff, and Scientologists who were present, and we'll piece together the bewildering circumstances and responses that followed Lisa's public breakdown. As they prepared to leave, the ambulance driver glanced back at Lisa's car. "Bonnie, she's taking her clothes off," he said. Lisa walked down the street completely naked, passing the ambulance. The paramedic quickly jumped out, guided Lisa to the back of the ambulance, and gave her a blanket. When the paramedic asked what she was doing, Lisa replied, "I wanted people to think I was crazy because I need help. I just wanted someone to talk to." Lisa was taken to the ER at Morton Plant Hospital in Clearwater, Florida. Join us as we unravel the complexities of this pivotal day in Lisa McPherson's life. Following summaries are derived from sworn statements recounting the recollections of those individuals who were present with Lisa at Morton Plant Hospital on November 18, 1995. These statements detail their roles, concerns, and actions taken upon learning of Lisa's accident and subsequent hospital visit. The individuals involved include church officials and medical personnel, providing these accounts under oath to explain their presence and involvement in the situation surrounding Lisa McPherson's ER visit and release.
The accident, November 18, 1995. Police report, Officer J. Farro. I was dispatched to an accident at South Fort Harrison Avenue and Bellevue Boulevard on November 18, 1995, at approximately 1740 hours. Investigation. Upon arrival, I parked my cruiser on the west grass shoulder of Fort Harrison Avenue, north of Bellevue. Fire department vehicles were occupying the southbound curb lane. The accident involved a motorcycle driven by a woman and a Ford Escort driven by an elderly man. Traffic was heavy in the area as all southbound traffic was funneling into the one still open center lane. This accident did not call for a police report, so I assisted in filling out a blue form driver's exchange. I then heard the screeching of a vehicle braking, followed by an impact. When I looked at the direction of the noise, I observed what appeared to be a second accident. A Jeep Cherokee had rear-ended a boat on a trailer. I requested a second unit to respond, and Officer M. Stonelake was dispatched. Fire department personnel checked for injuries and advised that none were present. If possible, I requested they advise the two drivers to move off the road to keep traffic flowing.
Officer Stonelake, I investigated a travel accident the victim was involved in. Investigation. At the time of the accident investigation, the victim walked away from the scene and removed all of her clothing. The paramedic from Sunstar stopped her after she removed all of her clothing. They brought her to an ambulance and provided her with a blanket. I spoke with the victim about her behavior. She indicated that she was having a hard time at the church, meaning the Church of Scientology, because she was not concentrating. She would not go into any further detail about that. I also noticed she appeared to be in a daze as I spoke to her. I had to ask her the same question several times to get a response. The victim attributed the accident to having a lot on her mind. The victim agreed to go with Sunstar to Morton Plant Hospital to speak to a counselor. I had no further contact with the victim.
Paramedic for Sunstar Ambulance, Bonnie Portolano's recollection of the events on November 18, 1995. Bonnie Portolano and her partner responded to a motor vehicle accident at the intersection of Bellevue and Fort Harrison. While assisting the Clearwater Fire Department with patients' refusal from the first accident, another minor accident occurred at the same intersection. The fire department also requested that Bonnie and her partner handle this refusal for this second incident. During the interactions, Bonnie noticed one of the individuals involved was new to the area and struggling to recall her address. The woman, Lisa, mentioned that mailing anything to a Texas address would eventually reach her. Although the address is not crucial for refusal, Bonnie found it odd but proceeded with the necessary paperwork. As Bonnie and her partner returned to their ambulance, her partner remarked on Lisa's peculiar behavior, referring to it as their crazy call of the day. However, things took a dramatic turn when Bonnie's partner spotted Lisa undressing in the side view mirror. Disbelieving at first, Bonnie quickly realized the situation when Lisa walked past her ambulance completely naked. Acting swiftly, Bonnie exited the ambulance to guide Lisa away from traffic. Lisa, complying, explained that she took her clothes off because she was an OT and wanted people to think she was crazy so they would help her. Bonnie, unfamiliar with the term OT, focused on ensuring Lisa's safety in getting her into the ambulance. Inside the ambulance, Lisa expressed feelings of being a bad person due to having bad thoughts and actions in her mind. Bonnie covered Lisa with a sheet and continued to ask her about her well-being. Lisa mentioned a significant concern about taking her eyes off the object, a statement Bonnie didn't fully understand at the time. The police officers who had gathered Lisa's clothing waited outside the ambulance to see if Lisa needed to be transported under the Baker Act. Lisa eventually agreed to go voluntarily, and Bonnie assured the police that no Baker Act was necessary. Lisa's request for her car to be towed to a specific address on Osceola hinted at her connection with Scientology. Throughout their conversation, Lisa displays signs of mental confusion, struggling with simple questions and often needing to be prompted to open her eyes to answer them. Despite this, she revealed that she worked for a publishing company on Lakeview and that she liked her job. Lisa's mental state seemed to fluctuate, showing apparent distress and fatigue. Bonnie and her partner transported Lisa to Morton Plant Hospital, where they debriefed the nurse on Lisa's condition and her desire for help. Bonnie felt deeply concerned for Lisa, sensing something special about her and hoping she would receive the necessary care. Bonnie recalls that after the initial assessment, a group of Scientologists had arrived at the emergency room and taken Lisa away despite her apparent need for further evaluation. Bonnie expressed frustration over the situation, comparing it to returning a battered wife to the abusive husband. She believed that Lisa's emotional turmoil and the influence of the Church of Scientology played a significant role in her distress. Lisa's constant reference to taking her eyes off the object and her self-perceived wrongdoings highlighted her internal struggle, something Bonnie wished she could have addressed more effectively if she had better knowledge of Scientology at the time. Ultimately, Bonnie's account paints a picture of a distraught woman caught between her need for help and the pressures of her religious affiliations. Despite Bonnie's best efforts to provide care, the constraints of the situation and Lisa's subsequent return to Scientologists left her feeling helpless and deeply saddened by the outcome.
The Recollection of Kim Brennan. Kim Brennan, a paramedic with 3.5 years of experience at Morton Plant Hospital and a background as a firefighter-paramedic at the Newport Richey Fire Department, detailed her experience with a patient brought in by EMS on November 18, 1995. Morton Plant was her first job in an emergency room, as she was also furthering her education to become a registered nurse. On the night of November 18, 1995, EMS personnel brought in a young woman involved in a minor motor vehicle accident. The patient, later identified as Lisa McPherson, had received treatment at the scene. Shortly after, she was found walking down the street naked, stating that she did not need her body at that time and wanted to talk to someone. EMS then transported her to the Morton Plant Emergency Department. Upon arrival, Lisa was placed in a bed, and Kim began to ask her several questions. Kim noted that Lisa kept her eyes closed and spoke very monotone. She would only open her eyes on command. Despite this, Lisa knew where she was, the day, and the year. Lisa stated that she had walked naked to make people think she was crazy and avoid being arrested. Kim completed the standard triage form asking about Lisa's mental status and medical history, all of which Lisa claimed were negative. Dr. Lovett, the emergency room physician on duty, examined Lisa and suggested a psychiatric evaluation due to her inappropriate behavior. Around 10 minutes after the EMS brought Lisa in, a member of the Church of Scientology arrived, claiming that a psychiatric consult was against the religion. Despite this, Dr. Lovett insisted on the evaluation. EMS personnel informed Kim that Lisa was a Scientologist. 2 more individuals arrived at Lisa's bedside, one identifying as a member of the congregation. They were very upset about the psychiatric evaluation, reiterating that it was against their practices. Dr. Lovett explained the necessity of evaluating Lisa's mental status to them. Joe, a registered nurse from the psychiatric department, conducted the evaluation. Despite the presence of Scientologists, Joe determined that Lisa was not a threat to herself or others, denying any suicidal or homicidal thoughts. Lisa expressed a desire to go home with her friends from the congregation. Dr. Lovett, after consulting with another physician, concluded that Lisa did not meet the criteria for the Baker Act. The Scientologists assured them that they would watch over her and handle any problems. Kim prepared an AMA against medical advice form for Lisa to sign as they felt she needed further evaluation. Lisa signed the form without issue, and Kim had the 2 Scientologists sign as witnesses given their commitment to her care. The Scientologists were adamant and upset about the evaluation, making their opposition clear. Kim noted they remained beside Lisa, leaning on a shelf near the bed. Lisa, meanwhile, provided very little information voluntarily, speaking only when directly questioned and keeping her eyes closed most of the time. Kim observed that Lisa felt somewhat comfortable with the first Scientologist who arrived, whom she identified as a friend. However, after the arrival of the other 2 individuals, the bedside became silent, and Lisa did not engage in further conversation. Lisa remained in the ER for about 2 hours. The first Scientologist arrived approximately 10 minutes after Lisa, with the others following shortly thereafter. The woman in the blue shirt and the tall man in the dark clothing assured Kim and Dr. Lovett that they would take care of Lisa and watch over her. Eventually, somebody brought clothing for Lisa, though Kim could not confirm if it was her original clothing or new clothes. Kim saw Lisa walk out of the emergency room with the 3 Scientologists through the double doors towards the exit. This encounter left Kim reflecting on the unusual and concerning circumstances, particularly the strong opposition from the Scientologists regarding the psychiatric evaluation. Kim had never experienced such controversy and deeply felt Lisa needed to receive proper care.
Joe Price's recollection of the events on November 18, 1995. Joseph Price worked as a clinical nurse specialist and liaison at Morton Plant Hospital. He had been part of the hospital's team since 1995, bringing with him 18 years of experience as a nurse, most of which he spent in psychiatry. His responsibilities included performing psych consults and psychiatric assessments to determine whether individuals met Baker Act criteria. On the night of November 18th, around 10 p.m., Joe Price vividly remembered being called to the emergency room. Upon arrival, Dr. Lovett, the doctor on duty, informed him that a young lady needed to be assessed. This patient, Lisa, was accompanied by members of the Church of Scientology, which was unusual. Dr. Lovett advised that if Joe wanted these individuals to leave, he should ask them, and security would be called if necessary. When Joe went to the cubicle, he found Lisa lying in bed with at least 3 church members present. One man dressed in a very nice suit identified himself as a lawyer. Initially, he resisted Joe's attempt to speak with Lisa. They seemed to believe that Joe was a psychologist or a psychiatrist. With Dr. Lovett's assistance, Joe clarified that he was a registered nurse and only wished to ensure Lisa's well-being. The church members dressed in plain clothes included at least 1 male and 1 female. Lisa, a physically healthy 36-year-old female of average height and weight, appeared passive and pale for a Florida resident with some freckles. Joe introduced himself and asked Lisa if she wanted to speak to him and if she wanted the others to leave. She hesitated slightly before answering, a pattern he noticed throughout the conversation. Joe's assessment included asking about medical problems, living arrangements, and marital status, which Lisa responded negatively and stated she didn't mind her friend staying. During the conversation, Joe noticed Lisa crossing her eyes before answering questions. When confronted, she explained it helped her to concentrate better, which Joe found strange. He asked about her psychiatric history and current thoughts of self-harm, both of which she denied. He also questioned her about her reported bizarre behavior of removing her clothes and running down the street after her car accident. Lisa explained that she did it to get attention and avoid arrest. Lisa did not meet the Baker Act criteria. She was alert and oriented, and her memory was intact despite her slow responses. Joe completed his assessment and reported to Dr. Dejani, the on-call psychiatrist, who concurred that they had no basis to Baker Act Lisa. The church members assured Joe that Lisa would be safe with them and would not harm herself or drive again that day. Joe observed them escort Lisa out of the hospital with 3 church members on either side of her, giving the impression she was a prisoner. Throughout the assessment, Joe felt the church members' presence may have intimidated Lisa, potentially affecting her responses. She seemed guarded and fearful, though it was unclear whether this was due to the car accident or the church members' presence. Joe's gut feeling was that Lisa could not speak freely. Joe noted that Dr. Lovett had released Lisa against medical advice, indicating a belief that she needed further evaluation. While Joe did not conduct a physical assessment, he observed no injuries on Lisa's face. The church members provided no details on how they would care for Lisa, only assuring Joe of her safety. Joe's impression as he watched Lisa leave the hospital accompanied by the church members was one of concern. Her mental state, as he documented, showed no signs of suicidal or homicidal tendencies, and she was able to think abstractly. However, her strange behavior and slow responses indicated something was amiss, although Joe, not being a psychiatrist, could not diagnose her condition.
Scientology converges on Morton Plant Hospital. Soon after Lisa arrived at Morton Plant Hospital, fellow Scientologists began arriving at the emergency room. Bennetta Slaughter, Lisa's boss, had alerted them. She had seen Lisa's car at the accident scene after the ambulance left and asked a policeman where the owner was. He directed her to Morton Plant Hospital. Bennetta was covered in paint from working on props for a charity drive, and she felt she wasn't in the best condition to visit a hospital herself. She also expressed that she just didn't like hospitals, so she called other Scientologists to check in on Lisa. Among those who responded were Elaine Korczynski, Judy Goldsberry Weber, Mary DeMoss, Annie Morrow, Humberto Fontana, Dr. Jean de Kuipere, Emma Shamehorn, and David Slaughter.
According to Elaine Korczynski, Elaine Korczynski was a senior case provider who supervised ministers, which Scientology calls auditors. These ministers perform special counseling with parishioners. Elaine ensured that case supervisors followed standard procedures in directing the spiritual counseling. Each minister has 4 to 10 parishioners at any given time, and each case supervisor has 10 to 20 ministers. The security office informed Elaine that a parishioner, Lisa McPherson, had some sort of accident and was at the hospital. He looked to see if he could send a minister there, someone who could go immediately to give any assistance if needed. Elaine couldn't find anyone, so he decided to go himself. When he arrived at the emergency room reception desk, he was met by a man who introduced himself as Lisa's employer, David Slaughter. He asked to see Lisa McPherson, and a few minutes later he was directed to her location. She was lying down, but not totally. The top of her body was elevated. She was in conversation with the male nurse. He told this nurse that he was the minister from the church. He greeted Lisa and she said hi and smiled, and he noted that she was very pale. The nurse introduced himself as Joe and told Alan he needed to ask Lisa more questions. Lisa grabbed Alan's hand and he held it as Joe asked her questions. He asked her, "What is your name? How old are you? What is your address? Where do you work? Have you taken alcohol today? Or do you take medicine or drugs?" This type of thing. Maybe 15 to 20 questions. Lisa answered the questions. At one point, she told Joe and Alan that she wanted to leave. She said, "I want to leave. I want to go to the church with him," meaning Alan. According to Alan, Nurse Joe said, "That's fine. All the answers you're giving me are right. But how do you explain what you did today, that you took your clothes off in the street? In response, Lisa said, "You're right. This was not a rational action. I am sorry." She then followed by saying, "I am sorry I did that. I think I wanted to create some effect. I am sorry I did it. It was not rational." Then she said again, "But you know, I don't want to stay here. I want to go to the hotel on Fort Harrison with him," meaning Alain. "I don't want to stay here," she said again. So Nurse Joe asked Alain to step out of the room. He wanted to ask her some questions. Alain left the room but stood near the corridor. 3 to 4 minutes later, Nurse Joe came out of the room and told Alain that he saw no need to keep Lisa and that she'd answered the questions well. Alain said she was not crying. She was embarrassed, concerned, perhaps upset. She didn't want to stay there, which was very clear to Alain. She wanted to leave and she mentioned wanting to rest and relax. 3 people were in the room while the nurse asked the questions. However, 2 girls were at the entrance of the room. One of them Alain didn't know. The other was Scientology doctor Jean de Kuiper. Alain figured the hospital was satisfied with whatever examinations they've done. With no reason to keep her there, Alain went back to the reception and saw David Slaughter. He said he didn't know what happened between that point and when she walked out. When she came out of the hospital reception area, about 10 minutes later, Alain asked if she needed a ride. Lisa said yes, she would appreciate a ride to the Fort Harrison Hotel, so Alain gave her a ride and drove her there. He dropped her off at the hotel and some hotel staffs were there, so he asked, "Could you take her to get a room?" And then Alain went to park his car. Lisa got to a room. After he parked his car, he went to Lisa's room to check on her. He asked her if she was going to be all right there, and she said yes. Alain said he got the idea that she wanted to relax and rest and be away from work and whatever, so he didn't pry. He said Lisa looked more relaxed at that point and felt she truly wanted to stay there more than anything else. She wanted to relax. After he left her, he returned to his office and called the medical liaison office and asked whoever answered the phone to check on Lisa and see if she needed anything.
According to Scientologist Dr. Jean de Kuiper, chiropractor. It was nighttime when she received a call from Bennetta Slaughter, Lisa McPherson's employer. Bennetta informed her that Lisa had been in an accident and asked if she could go to the hospital. Bennetta had been working all day and still had paint on her. She also had a strong aversion to blood and medical situations. Bennetta told her Lisa was at Morton Plant Hospital and requested that she head over there. When she arrived at the hospital, she asked if there was a Lisa McPherson admitted. David Slaughter, Bennetta's husband, was there, and he told her Lisa was in the emergency room. She asked if she could go back and see her, and they permitted her to do so. In the receiving area, she saw Lisa wearing a hospital gown. Lisa appeared fine to her. There was no blood or visible injuries. At that moment, she still didn't know the details of the accident. She was informed that Lisa had run into the back of a car or something. The next thing she knew, Lisa had no clothes on. She never fully understood the sequence of events, but that was what she was told. Another person was there, a woman named Mary, who she understood to be Bennetta's assistant. She was unsure how Mary arrived, but Mary had Lisa's clothes with her. It was just Lisa and Mary at that point. Lisa didn't offer an explanation, and perhaps she didn't give her the opportunity to do so. She merely told Lisa that she had messed up. Lisa didn't seem frightened at all. The area was bustling with activity, with people and doctors constantly moving around. It was a chaotic environment with a sick child suffering from whooping cough and a lot of noise. They didn't get a chance to have a proper conversation. A doctor came in at one point to examine Lisa's eyes, checking for head injuries, but there were no lacerations on her body. From the time she arrived until they left together, it felt like a hand-holding experience rather than a serious discussion. Lisa didn't seem irrational to her. Lisa cried briefly, perhaps in front of a doctor, but it was short-lived. Lisa didn't joke and seemed more in shock from the accident, withdrawn and not very talkative. Her previous back injury didn't come up. The emergency room doctors consulted her only once, asking her if she knew why Lisa might need assistance. She shared that in July, Lisa had issues regulating her salt and potassium levels due to the heat. During her time there, she didn't have any x-rays taken. Mary had been with Lisa up to that point, and doctors mainly conducted reflex and eye tests, finding nothing unusual. No one asked about her relationship with Lisa. When it came time for Lisa's release, there were no significant conversations between Lisa and the doctors. Lisa signed herself out, and she signed as a witness. They had a psychiatric nurse there question Lisa to ensure she was rational. One of the questions was about saying people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, which Lisa answered correctly. Lisa's minister, Mr. Kordinsky, arrived at some point. The doctor asked about his relationship with Lisa. Bennetta never showed up, which she didn't expect given Bennetta's aversion to such situations. Mary left after the first 20 minutes, and she didn't see her again. After confirming who Kordinsky was, he left the emergency room. She stayed with Lisa until all the necessary tests were completed. The doctor eventually released Lisa, advising her not to run in the streets naked again, and implied she should look after Lisa. They signed the correct release forms and walked out together. As they exited, she saw Kordinsky and another man, though she was unsure if David Slaughter was still there. Lisa got into Kordinsky's car, and she followed him in her car.
According to Judy Goldsberry Weber, Scientologist, medical liaison officer. Judy Goldsberry Weber was a nurse, respiratory therapist, and an LPN with 35 years' experience. She spent 7 years on the staff of respiratory therapy at the University of Oregon Health Science Center in Portland, and 5 years working with the state. Then she moved on to private duty, living with terminally ill patients until they passed. Lisa McPherson came into Judy's MLO office in the summer of 1995. Lisa was having difficulty sleeping and had a loss of appetite. Judy discovered that Lisa had recently moved from a different climate and suggested she see a physician to see if medical condition was causing these issues. Judy provided her with a list of 3 doctors. Lisa returned a couple of days later saying she had visited Dr. DeKuyper, a chiropractor and a nutritionist, who helped her identify the problem. Lisa was happy and reported that her issues were being resolved with Dr. DeKuyper's program to improve her appetite and sleep. 2 weeks before the accident, Lisa attested to clear. It was stated that she was happy, elated, and bubbly. The next time Judy saw her was at the hospital. Security paged Judy, informing her she needed to go to Morton Plant Hospital immediately, though they did not provide a name of a patient. At the hospital, the admitting staff directed Judy to where Lisa was. Lisa was in the fast-track area and recognized Judy. Lisa was nervous but appeared unharmed. Though there was a lot of noise and confusion around them, Lisa expressed a strong desire to leave the hospital. Judy spoke with Dr. Lovett, who was taking care of Lisa. Despite his concerns, the psychiatric evaluator stated Lisa did not meet the criteria for psychiatric observation. Judy asked if there was any physical reason to keep Lisa in the hospital, and both the doctor and evaluator confirmed there was none. Judy informed Lisa that she would start the paperwork for her discharge, which made Lisa very happy. Judy then told Mr. Fontana and other staff members awaiting outside about the proceedings for Lisa's release. Lisa had been in an accident and was in a hospital gown, but someone had her clothes. Judy walked Lisa out of the hospital, where Lisa walked with Mr. Kordinsky and Dr. DeKuyper towards the car. Judy instructed Mr. Fontana to ensure Lisa went to a place where she could relax and be quiet as per doctor's recommendations. A few days later, Judy inquired about Lisa's condition and found out from her senior, Janice, that Lisa had been taken to the Fort Harrison Hotel. Janice assured Judy that Lisa was okay and everything was being taken care of. Judy asked Janice to tell Lisa she said hello and that Lisa should come visit when she felt better.
According to Annie Morrow, Annie Morrow's role involved researching and collecting information necessary to provide direction on handling situations that might present public relations or legal challenges for the Church of Scientology. Annie doesn't remember exactly who informed her about a parishioner being in an accident, but it might have been Brian Anderson. She then went to Morton Plant Hospital. Annie had never met Lisa McPherson until the day Lisa went to Morton Plant Hospital following her car accident. Her purpose in going to the hospital was to find out what was going on, assess if the situation required the church's concern, and gather information to handle the matter in a way that would help Lisa and protect the church. Their main concern was the potential involvement of a psychiatrist. David Slaughter, Bennetta Slaughter's husband, was at the hospital, as was Jean DeKuyper, another parishioner and a chiropractor who had previously treated Lisa. After Annie had arrived at the hospital, she believes Emma Shamehorn was already there, followed by Judy Goldsberry Weber and Elaine Korczynski. It's unusual for such incidents to happen to a longtime Scientologist who should be in a good frame of mind. It's tragic for someone to experience a mental breakdown. Annie did not speak to anyone at the hospital, but Humberto did. His goal was to inform the hospital authorities that Lisa was a Scientologist and, based on her religious beliefs, would not want psychiatric treatment or medication. Annie doesn't know who Humberto talked to or the reaction he received, but that was his purpose. Judy came because she was familiar with the hospital from previous visits with parishioners and staff for emergency care. In the emergency room, Mary DeMoss and Jean de Kuipere were present, and later Alan Korczynski was able to see Lisa. Annie isn't sure if Judy actually saw Lisa. Annie didn't speak to Lisa herself. Anything she learned about this situation came later. Before Lisa was discharged, Annie was concerned about where Lisa would go, how she would be cared for, and whether she needed assistance. There was some discussion about where Lisa might stay, and it was decided she shouldn't stay by herself because she was obviously unstable. Annie recalls Elaine being on the phone, coordinating Lisa's care and where she should go. The decision made by those at the church rather than by Elaine or Annie was that Lisa should go to the Fort Harrison for rest and relaxation. Mr. Korczynski, in his technical position, would know what to do to help someone in Lisa's condition. Lisa walked out of the hospital with Jean de Kuipere, Emma, and Elaine. She got into Elaine's car with Emma and Jean heading to the Fort Harrison. Annie then left the hospital and returned to her office to start gathering information on Lisa. She compiled various types of information, including correspondence between Lisa and the church, and provided it to her seniors, including Brian. This information would be useful to the legal department. Although Annie herself didn't go through Lisa's PC folder, Elaine probably did. Eventually, this information was sent to Los Angeles.
Recollection of Humberto Fontana. Humberto Fontana moved from LA to Clearwater in 1988 to fill the position of Director of Social Reform in the Office of Special Affairs. In this role, he worked with parishioners to organize community activities aimed at helping in various areas, such as drug rehabilitation, literacy, study technology, and exposing psychiatry violations of human rights through the Citizens Commission of Human Rights. His main focus was to engage parishioners' interest in community involvement. In the Office of Special Affairs in Clearwater, Humberto worked alongside Brian Anderson, Mary Story, Annie Mora, Alice Herbin, Glenn Stalo, Ben Shaw, and his wife. Humberto received word that Lisa McPherson had been taken to Morton Plant Hospital. He recalls coming into the office in the afternoon when either his wife or Annie Mora mentioned that a parishioner had been involved in a car accident and had been taken to Morton Plant. He was told there was some issue with her taking her clothes off. He then decided that he should go to the hospital. At the hospital, Humberto encountered Annie Mora, who had likely driven herself there. Several other people from the church were present, including Judy Goldsberry Weber and possibly Emma Shamehorn. He also believed that David Slaughter was there but didn't recall seeing Elaine Korczynski. Upon arriving, Humberto spoke with Judy Goldsberry Weber. He asked her how Lisa was doing and if there was a threat of her being taken to the psychiatric wing. Judy said it wasn't determined yet, which was Humberto's main concern. Humberto's main conversation at the hospital was with Judy, although he may have briefly spoken with Emma Shamehorn. He then spoke to one of the doctors and a psychiatric nurse, expressing his concern that Lisa shouldn't be admitted to the psychiatric wing based on their belief that psychiatry does more harm than good and his fear that she might be harmed or raped. Humberto didn't speak to Lisa directly but knew she was a church member and opposed to psychiatric treatment. He had been informed by either Emma or Judy that Lisa had been released. He said he saw her walking out with a couple of people. After leaving the hospital, Humberto returned to the Fort Harrison. He spoke with one of the security guards, confirming that Lisa had been released and was either on her way or had already arrived at the Fort Harrison, which surprised him as he didn't know why she was going there. Several people were taking care of Lisa. Elaine Korczynski, the senior case supervisor, was responsible for the technical matters of her counseling. Humberto recalled being briefed by either Annie or his wife that Lisa wanted to go in for counseling, but was unable to do so because she wasn't resting well. To his knowledge, no one from his office went to see her.
According to Emma Louise Shamehorn, Emma Louise Shamehorn moved to Clearwater on April 23, 1987, to join the Sea Organization. Prior to that, she and her husband owned a small aviation business in Alberta, Canada, for 20 years until their separation. After that, she worked in various office roles such as secretary and receptionist. At Flag, Emma served as the Public Medical Liaison Officer, acting as a bridge between public individuals receiving services at the church and the medical profession. She held that position for approximately 8 years despite not having specific medical training. Public Scientologists pay for their own medical care while the church covers medical expenses for its staff. The first time Emma met Lisa McPherson was at Morton Plant Hospital. Her son-in-law, Nick McFarland, drove her to the hospital and dropped her off at the door. She didn't realize Lisa had wrecked her car, but was there because her beeper indicated that a public person at the hospital needed attention. In the waiting room or hallway, she saw Humberto Fontana, Judy, and possibly Annie Morrow. Emma's purpose was to assess what help Lisa required and fulfill her role as the medical liaison officer. Although she didn't speak personally to Lisa, she was shown to Lisa's room where a psychiatric nurse and Elaine Korczynski were present. There may have been another person, possibly Dr. de Kuyper, but Emma wasn't quite sure. The nurse asked to speak to Lisa alone, so Emma and the others stepped into the hallway. Judy Goldsberry Weber arrived, mentioning she knew the doctor and would speak to him. Shortly after, Judy came out and informed them that Lisa was being released. They all left with Lisa at that point. They divided into cars, and Emma riding in the back to the Fort Harrison with Mr. Korczynski and Lisa. It wasn't until they arrived at the hotel that they were informed which room Lisa would be staying in. Janet Herring met them at the entrance and directed them to the specific room in the cabanas at the back of the hotel. Emma assisted Lisa to the room. Lisa was calm and quiet and appeared healthy. At that point, Lisa had few belongings with her, possibly just a purse, though Emma couldn't recall exactly. Her things were reportedly brought to the hotel by Bennetta Slaughter, although Emma did not see them delivered herself. Lisa's bags were in the closet the next time Emma entered the room.
We have questions. Why did Lisa's behavior change so drastically after the car accident? What could have triggered such a severe response, and why was she struggling so much to articulate her thoughts and feelings?
What role did Scientology's practices play in Lisa's decision to undress in public? Was this a cry for help or a manifestation of deeper psychological distress exacerbated by her involvement with the church?
How did the presence of multiple Scientologists at the hospital influence the medical staff's decision? Were the medical professionals coerced or intimidated into releasing Lisa prematurely?
Why was Lisa's request for possible help at the hospital so vehemently opposed by the Scientologists present? How does this reflect on Scientology's broader stance towards mental health and psychiatric care?
What were the implications of the Scientologists' promise to care for Lisa after her release? Did they have proper training or resources to handle her condition? And why did they choose to take on this responsibility?
How did the medical staff reconcile Lisa's apparent mental distress with her lucid moments? Was there enough evidence to justify a more thorough psychiatric evaluation despite her periods of coherence?
What was the significance of Lisa's comment about being an OT and her need to make people think she was crazy? How do these statements relate to Scientology's teachings and practices?
Why did the hospital agree to release Lisa into the care of non-medical personnel? What were the legal and ethical oversights in this decision?
What impact did Lisa's prior interactions with the church have on her mental state during the hospital visit? Can we draw a line between her previous experiences and her actions on November 18, 1995?
How does this case highlight the potential conflicts between religious freedom and medical ethics? Should there be more stringent guidelines when dealing with cases involving controversial religious organizations?
These are the questions that continue to haunt those seeking justice for Lisa McPherson. The intricacies of her case reveal not only the personal struggles of one woman, but also the broader implication of institutional practices in the fine line between religious belief and the medical responsibility. As we delve deeper into this harrowing story, we aim to uncover the truth and shed light on the dark corners of Lisa's final days.
Coming up next on Sins of Scientology, we bring you part 3 of our series on Lisa McPherson. We will walk you through the final 17 days of Lisa's life spent under the close watch of fellow Scientologists. What happened behind the closed doors of the Fort Harrison Hotel? How did a woman seeking help end up losing her life under such mysterious circumstances? Stay tuned as we continue to uncover the disturbing details and lingering questions surrounding Lisa McPherson's tragic end.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Sins of Scientology. Today we've peeled back another layer on the troubling events surrounding Lisa McPherson's life and untimely death. The details and testimonies we've examined raise critical questions about the influence of Scientology over its members and the length they will go to maintain control. In our next episode, we'll delve deeper into the final 17 days of Lisa's life, days marked by increasing isolation and distress under the church's care.
This is Sandy McKenna.
And I am Abraham Ulrich. Until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and may your journey be as rich and enlightening as the stories you encounter.